Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Red Donkey Projections. I'm Eric, and we have Lucas as always.
Hey everyone.
Today is June 5th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the 2021 New York City mayoral election. We're going to give an update on the race, refresh you guys on who are the main candidates and their background. We're going to talk about some polling numbers, how progressive each candidate is, and how they stand in each New York City borough.
And with that being said, let's get right into it. So let's take a look at first all these candidates. Of course, there's I believe 13 candidates that have announced and that will be on the ballot in on June 22nd. But we have broke it down to four, I guess, main candidates here. So you've got Scott Stringer, who initially was like one of the top front runners, but recently had a sexual assault allegation, which has brought him down drastically in the polling numbers, and we don't think he has as much of a shot as he did before. Then you have Catherine Garcia, who we'll be talking about a little bit later because of some interesting information that we've gotten. And then Eric Adams, who's one of the front runners, along with Andrew Yang, the other front runner. So I think of the four, the top two are obviously going to be Eric Adams and Andrew Yang. But I wouldn't be surprised if Catherine Garcia or Scott Stringer would be able to pull out an upset. So since we made videos on this in the past, we're just going to quickly go through these endorsements here. So Eric Adams has coalesced a decent amount of support in the House and in Congress. Catherine Garcia, who was the former sanitation commissioner, has some support. And it's also worth noting to mention that Eric Adams has a lot of state legislator supports. He's a pretty established figure in New York City politics. Scott Stringer, before the allegation of sexual assault, he had a lot of support, a lot of progressive support. Jamal Bowman, Adriano Espaillat. I'm sorry, I think I may have butchered that. Apologies. But a lot of them did end up withdrawing the endorsement as a result of the sexual assault allegation made against him. And it's also worth to note Maya Wiley here. I know I didn't say she was one of the top four candidates because, quite frankly, I don't think she has a chance of winning. The four I listed, those are the ones that we believe that she has that have a chance of winning. Maya Wiley, she's getting a lot of progressive support, but I don't think she will end up winning because of the other candidates. Andrew Yang, and he doesn't have that much established support in Congress. He has more of individual supporters. He has some support: Grace Meng, Richie Torres from the House, some state legislators. I think Ron Kim and John Liu were the most prominent ones, but he really doesn't have as much compared to others. So I'll give it over to Eric now to kind of describe the polling in this race, which has been very interesting.
So what we see in the most recent polls is that Catherine Garcia is actually in the lead, as Lucas can show very recently. That little orange line shows how Garcia is on top of Yang, on top of Adams, which, as Lucas mentioned, are probably the two that will be going extremely neck and neck. We probably think that this is an outlier, but we're not saying that Garcia doesn't have a chance. As Lucas also said, she very well could pull out an upset, and it's very possible. But there were outliers in all polls. I don't know if maybe some of you remember, but way back in November or October, there was an outlier where Joe Biden was leading 17 points in Wisconsin, and obviously that was definitely not the final result. So outliers happen. That's why we take polls with a little bit of a grain of salt, but they do give some sort of indicator. We don't like taking the actual numbers out of them, but we'll have to see maybe some sort of other polls that may come out that will show us some sort of more clear or a different sort of result, or maybe the same consistent one. Who knows?
So yeah, I think some people might be wondering, why did Garcia get all of a sudden this huge boost from polling in I don't know, fifth or sixth and all the way up to first now? I think a lot of it did have to do with her endorsement by the New York Times. Let me get it up here. Catherine Garcia, right here. Catherine Garcia, the New York Times endorsed her for experience. New York Daily News also endorsed her. So perhaps that ended up swaying some people, but I don't think that she will win at the end of the day. So we actually made this little graphic here. We did our best here. We put the four major candidates, plus we put Maya Wiley here, and I think Diana Morales would also be here on this most progressive side. These two candidates, and Stringer too. The big contrast here probably was on police reform. Yang, Adams, Garcia, they were all saying, no, don't, defund the police. That's not the right option. How do we handle the subways? Put more police officers there. Stringer and Wiley both have advocated for, I believe, less police funding for sure, and and I guess taking not believing that police is the right option at all times, and like the idea. I remember a quote of Stringer saying in one of the debates that the right idea isn't to flood subway stations with police officers or something like that. So that's one issue they have differed on. I think another one was with raising the ultra rich tax. These three don't right here. They don't believe in doing that, while Stringer and Wiley do. So, Eric Adams is a very pro law and order type of candidate, I believe. He he doesn't believe in getting rid of solitary confinement, while I think every other candidate does. He also used to support stop and frisk. He actually was a Republican before, but he is a Democrat now as the Brooklyn Borough president. Him and Andrew Yang got in a pretty feisty battle during the debate a few days ago. But yeah, this matchup will be very interesting. So I think that at the end of the day, one of these people on the least progressive side, the lesser progressive side, will end up winning the nomination.
And also, I think it's important to note that Eric Adams was the former, I think, police captain in Brooklyn. So, and that may explain why he's so pro law and order as well.
Yeah, I think it was the NYPD. He was the captain of. But yeah, I think these are very interesting graph to look like. I don't know if it's 100% accurate because we did go back and forth on whether Andrew Yang or Catherine Garcia was more progressive. I think they're pretty similar. I've heard arguments from both sides on which is more progressive, and this segues into something else we wanted to mention. AOC, obviously a very well-known congresswoman, has endorsed Maya Wiley for mayor. Well, not governor. um, I think this is interesting, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to swing the election because I think a lot of young people do listen to AOC. Perhaps this endorsement could end up impacting them, but I don't see a way that Maya Wiley can end up winning. So let's actually take a look at this page from the New York Times. Obviously, donor numbers are not a very accurate way to measure, support. We saw this with Beto in 2018. He outraised completely, still lost. Sarah Gideon outspent Susan Collins, I think 8-1, and still lost. It's not an accurate measurement, but it gives us a general idea of maybe where are the candidates' bases in New York City. So I'm going to actually pass over to Eric now to discuss maybe where does Andrew Yang have his support in New York City.
So Andrew Yang has most of his support in Brooklyn and Queens. And also, there's the little description box which shows how Yang is doing well in Jewish Orthodox and Asian populations. And it's also important to note that in terms of polling, there was one little article that said that Asians and Jews may be underpolled, which is why Yang may not be leading, but it's just a speculation. But long story short, Andrew Yang is doing the best in Brooklyn and Queens. And I think between Staten Island and the Bronx, it's going to be really neck and neck between Andrew Yang and Eric Adams because they're going to have very similar like distributions throughout those boroughs. There's really no distinct lead in them. But this is Andrew Yang's campaign, and I think he also has the most donors of 11,400.
Right, and he also does have a lot of outside support as well, but he does have the most donors in New York City. Eric Adams, the other front runner here, obviously the Brooklyn area. His main base is going to be those moderates because he is the most moderate candidate running on the Democratic ticket. So it says here, a lot of the Brooklynites, maybe some in Queens, but it's going to be mainly Brooklyn, and this is because he was the former borough president. Actually, no, he's the current borough president of Brooklyn. Diane Morales, another candidate, a very progressive candidate. We're going to skip over her because she doesn't really have much of a chance. Neither is Maya Wiley. Whoa, they didn't put Scott Stringer on here, but let's see. Yeah, so Scott Stringer support, I guess, before the sexual harassment or sexual assault allegations came out. I'm actually kind of surprised by this map, but I was expecting a lot in Manhattan. This is actually not as much as I was thinking because Scott Stringer is the current comptroller. He was also the former Manhattan borough president. So I was expecting a little more support here, but this is interesting. And this is actually a good segue to our next part, which is where we make our final predictions on this. Well, not final. We still have a lot of time before the election. Let's go borough by borough here. So let's start off with the easier ones first that we're pretty sure on. So I'll start with Andrew Yang. I think that Queens at this point is a likely for him. And this is because it has a very high Asian American population, especially in Flushing, and that this is where his base mainly is going to be with that Asian population, emphasizing that he would be the first Asian American mayor of New York City. Let's head now to let's go to Brooklyn. Eric, why don't you cover that?
So in Brooklyn, I think we can put Eric Adams in the lead, but in a lean margin. Um, as we described, he has a pretty big presence in Brooklyn, but also at the same time, there are quite a few Jews in Brooklyn. And as we described earlier, the Orthodox Jews, for the most part, usually support Andrew Yang. So he could, take part of Eric Adams' margin, which is why he's only winning this in a lean. But we do think Eric Adams is going to win at the end of the day.
And that's because he is from the Brooklyn area. I know he is from Brooklyn. And Brooklyn does have, I think they do have a decent share of those more moderate candidates here. So we're gonna go with lean on that. And now this is when it gets a little harder with Manhattan and Staten Island and the Bronx. So this is tough. But if we had to give it to someone, I think that Manhattan will go lean Yang. And I actually think who will come second in the first place ballots is probably going to be Stringer because he is from here, former Manhattan borough president. He's a well-known name here. However, and we actually had this borough going to him before the sexual assault allegations, but with these new developments coming in, we don't think there's a chance he could end up winning here. But we're only going to give it to Yang slightly. He founded Manhattan Prep here, which was, I believe it was an SAT prep program. And I think he is also pretty well known, which could do him good in this area. But again, Manhattan is very hard to call. And then, of course, we have the Bronx and Staten Island, which is even harder to call. Eric, why don't you make your prediction for this?
So I guess we can start off with Staten Island, and as we saw in the donor numbers, between Eric Adams and Andrew Yang, the amount of donors were quite the same. Like they had equal presence, both Adams and Yang. But I know that doesn't necessarily translate into an actual prediction. But if I would have to give it to someone, I would probably give it to Andrew Yang in a tilt. This is like, I can't, no one can really go off of much of a substance here, but it's just possible that Andrew Yang could win Staten Island because there's not as many progressives in Staten Island. In fact, it's very conservative. Once again, that doesn't necessarily mean that the Democrats in Staten Island are actually moderate, even though it actually may. So, it's really hard to tell, but I think at this point, it's not worth putting it as a toss up.
And yeah, I know these two are very hard to call. The Bronx we also had before as a swing district, and we had it as toss up before. And if we had to give it to someone again, I think it would probably be either Tilt Yang or Tilt Adams, and that's really hard to tell for now. We're going to keep this one as toss-up, and even Staten Island, I probably would also be keeping as toss-up. It's just way too hard to tell how the voters might end up going. So we probably need to wait for more data for this, but we'll get some more info soon, and we'll give you a new update.
Yep.
And there's one other thing I want to know before we end this video, and it's the fact that we got new information that they won't be releasing all the results at once on primary night. I believe what they're doing is on the primary night, they're going to be releasing only the first choice ballots. And for those who don't know, in New York City, they're doing the election a little differently this year. Recently passed something called ranked choice voting, which is when you rank your favorite candidates in order that you want them to be mayor. And what happens is first they count all the first choice ballots. Then after that round, I believe the person with the lowest amount of first choice ballots is eliminated, and all of their votes are reallocated based on what they put for their second choice. So, and the process keeps repeating. And I heard that on the 22nd, we're only going to find out the first choice ballot votes, which is good for us because we can make more videos about it, more predictions using that information. But we are likely going to have to wait until June 12th to figure out who actually won this mayor election after they finish reallocating all of the votes.
Right.
So
And
stay tuned for that. Yeah.
yep. One more thing before we go. Lucas meant July 12th, but more importantly, I think for for us to make a better prediction or for anyone to get a better picture of what's going on, I think in fact all of the candidates should be campaigning. It's just my personal opinion because we have made videos in the past and explained what happens when candidates do not campaign and just hopefully rely on people turning out. What happens is that they don't turn out, So in general, for politicians, it's better for them to make the extra step of campaigning and trying to mobilize the base if they really want to see results. And on that note, I think we can end the video.
Yeah, and one last thing to add is that we think that Andrew Yang, if you haven't, I guess we didn't clearly say it yet, but we believe that this race is between Lean Yang and likely Yang. We can't tell exactly yet because of the tightening numbers within the closing days, but we'll be waiting for more information to come out when all the undecideds end up, going for someone. And that is the end of the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this episode, please like when you like our content, please subscribe. And we'll see you in our next episode tomorrow.
See ya.